Preppers love to stack massive 100-ounce silver bars, but historical forensics from the siege of Sarajevo show that handing a massive bar to a desperate merchant for a loaf of bread or antibiotics is a fatal mistake. Furthermore, that silver coin in your pocket won't safely purify water if it's mixed with copper. Today, we dissect the granularity rule and the biological necessity of keeping the right kind of silver. In a functioning society, a 100-ounce silver bar looks like prudence. It looks dense, serious, adult. It feels like compressed security, but collapse does not reward what looks impressive on a shelf. It rewards what can move, what can be trusted, and what can be broken into a price small enough to match the size of the emergency. A man trying to buy flour, painkillers, batteries, or a few hours of transport through a dangerous district does not need a statement of wealth. He needs exact change that does not require a scale, a smartphone, an essay, or a negotiation that lasts long enough to attract the wrong eyes. That was the street-level logic of Sarajevo. During the siege, civilians lived through repeated shortages of water, electricity, fuel, medicine, and food. Hospitals functioned under scarcity. Public utilities were disrupted. Daily life narrowed into queues, improvisation, and risk. In that environment, the problem with a large silver bar was not only that it was heavy, the problem was that it forced a dangerous question in front of hungry people. How do you make change for concentrated wealth in a city where trust has already been shelled to pieces? And that is where most preppers' silver theory breaks. They prepare for inflation. History prepares you for denomination failure. Because in a real rupture, wealth is not measured first by how much metal you own. It is measured by whether the next person will recognize it fast enough to trade without killing you for the difference. The first rule of wealth in a crisis is brutal. Value that cannot be divided becomes value that cannot circulate. That is the granularity rule. In normal times, people obsess over total ounces. In broken times, people care about denomination, familiarity, and the speed of trust. A large silver bar may contain real value, but in a live emergency, it creates three immediate problems. First, it has no natural price point. You are not buying a farm. You are trying to buy candles, insulin, a ride, a sack of rice, a few liters of fuel, or someone's place in line. Daily survival transactions shrink. Wealth has to shrink with them. Second, it creates an authentication burden. A recognizable coin can be seen, touched, weighed in the hand, and understood in seconds. A cast bar raises questions. Is it real? Is it plated? Is it underweight? Who will assay it? In a blackout economy, every extra minute of verification is friction, and friction kills trade. Third, it broadcasts surplus. If you reveal a large bar in front of people operating at the edge of hunger, you are not merely offering payment. You are declaring that you possess concentrated reserves. That changes the social temperature of the transaction immediately. This is why collapse economies do not behave like bullion forums. They behave like street markets under stress. Look at Sarajevo. The siege began in April 1992 and lasted until February 1996. Civilian life was shaped by shelling, sniping, blocked relief, and repeated shortages of food, water, fuel, electricity, and medical supplies. The formal economy did not simply weaken. It was forced into improvisation. That meant survival moved through whatever could be trusted quickly under pressure. And once you understand that, the logic of so-called junk silver becomes obvious. Pre-1965 U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were struck in 90% silver, with copper added for hardness. More important than their metallurgy is their granularity. A dime is already a fraction. A quarter is already a smaller promise. You do not need to cut anything, melt anything, or explain anything. The unit arrives pre-divided. That is what most silver stacks get wrong. In a crisis, the question is not how much silver do you own. The The real question is, can your silver survive first contact with a frightened stranger who needs to price eggs, antibiotics, or diesel in less than 10 seconds? Because if the answer is no, then your silver is not money yet. It is inventory. This is why junk silver matters more than most people realize. Not because it is glamorous, not because it is rare, and not because it will magically solve every problem in a breakdown. It matters because it arrives in the correct human format. Pre-1965, US dimes, quarters, and half dollars were struck in 90% silver, a composition the US Mint itself still refers to as coin silver. Historically, circulating US silver coinage used 900 fineness until the mid-1960s shift away from silver in dimes and quarters. That matters, but the deeper advantage is not metallurgical purity. It is social legibility. A dime is a known thing. A quarter is a known thing. Even someone who has never memorized silver spot prices understands, at a glance, that these pieces were designed as small units for exchange. And, in a stressed market, legibility is liquidity. A 1-ounce round may still work in some transactions. A 100-ounce bar almost certainly fails most of them, but a bag of old dimes and quarters does something those larger forms cannot do. It lets both sides of a trade anchor value without needing to destroy the object to make it usable. No cutting, no shaving, no improvised assays, no argument about how to make change for the metal. The fraction already exists. That is the hidden power of junk silver. It was minted for circulation, and in a crisis, that original design intention becomes an advantage again. Think about the scale of real need in a failing city. Not land purchases, not vehicle purchases. Soup, painkillers, lamp oil, water containers, a few eggs, a ride through a bad district. In those transactions, the best asset is not the one with the highest abstract value. It is the one that can close the tray before fear enters the room. That was the logic of siege economies like Sarajevo, where daily civilian life was defined by shortages, disrupted utilities, humanitarian dependence, and the constant compression of normal commerce into improvised exchange. When electricity, water, fuel, and medicine are unstable, people do not have patience for elegant bullion theory. They gravitate toward whatever is easiest to recognize, hardest to fake in the moment, and least likely to trigger conflict over denomination. So the real advantage of junk silver is not that it contains silver. It is that it contains silver in pieces small enough to behave like human money under stress. And that leads to the second mistake many people make. They assume the silver best suited for barter is also the silver best suited for water and medicine. History says otherwise. The second mistake is more subtle and more dangerous. People hear that silver has antimicrobial properties and then flatten that fact into a survival myth. They assume all silver is interchangeable. A coin, a bar, a spoon, a round, a medical dressing, a filter medium, a colloid, an ion source. Same metal, same job. It is not the same job. Silver's historical importance came from its biological activity, but that activity depends on form, purity, release conditions, and dose. What does the work is not silver in the abstract. It is silver in a chemically available form, especially silver ions interacting with microbial cells in ways that disrupt multiple systems at once. Reviews of silver's antimicrobial action describe membrane damage, interference with respiratory enzymes, oxidative stress, and binding interactions with cellular components that bacteria need in order to survive. That multipathway pressure is one reason silver remained useful across so many applications for so long. That is the real meaning behind the old oligodynamic reputation of silver, not magic, not mysticism. A metal ion with broad antimicrobial effects at low concentrations under the right conditions. But the phrase "under the right conditions" is where survival advice usually collapses, because the silver that is ideal for barter was engineered for durability in circulation, not for controlled antimicrobial release into drinking water. Pre-1965, U.S. coin silver was 90% silver and 10% copper. That copper was not a flaw in monetary design. It was a feature. It hardened the coins so they could survive years of handling, impact, and wear. As transaction metal, that alloy is excellent. As a blunt, improvised water treatment object, it is a different story. The World Health Organization's review of silver and drinking water treatment makes the distinction clear. Silver is used in defined water-related applications such as filter media coatings or controlled disinfection systems, not as a vague folk talisman dropped into a container and hoped over. The antimicrobial effect depends on the chemistry of release. And that brings us to the contamination trap. The same copper that makes junk silver durable and recognizable in trade is exactly why you should not confuse a barter coin with a biological tool. Once you start talking about emergency water, you are no longer solving a pricing problem. You are solving a toxicology and microbiology problem, and history is full of people who survived the market only to be defeated by what they drank. Here is the trap in one sentence. The alloy that makes junk silver durable enough for barter is exactly what disqualifies it as your improvised all-purpose water solution. Pre-1965 coin silver was built for circulation. The copper content gave the coin hardness, wear resistance, and a long service life in pockets, tills, and cash drawers. That is why it works so well as barter metal. But once you move from exchange into drinking water, durability stops being the key variable. Control chemistry becomes the key variable. The WHO's reviews on silver in drinking water make the distinction bluntly. Silver's effectiveness depends on form, concentration, and application. And silver used in water systems is discussed as ionic silver, nanoparticles, coatings, and engineered treatment methods, not as a random mixed alloy coin dropped into a container as folk protection. WHO also reviews safety concerns around silver exposure and treats water disinfection as a dose and system problem, not a superstition. That is also why space systems do not rely on myth. NASA's potable water work for spacecraft repeatedly focuses on silver ion biocide and controlled delivery into the water system. One NASA paper states that silver-treated water has been accepted under ISS potable water standards, while later NASA work describes biocidal silver as an active area of research for spacecraft potable water architectures. In other words, the model is not throw silver into water. The model is engineered ion release. At the low-tech end, the same pattern appears. Potters for Peace describes ceramic water filters that are tested and then coated with colloidal silver, combining fine pore filtration with silver's bactericidal properties. Again, not a barter coin, not an alloy guess, not a prepper talisman. A designed medium with a defined role, so the lesson is severe and simple. You junk silver may help you buy water. That does not mean it is the right silver to make water safer. Confuse those two jobs, and you import uncertainty into the one system your body cannot negotiate with for long. So the protocol that emerges from the forensic record is not complicated. It is disciplined. Keep 90% junk silver for one job only. Economic exchange in small stress transactions. Its strength is granularity, recognizability, and social trust under pressure. It is not the most glamorous silver. That is precisely why it has a chance of working when glamour has become a liability. Keep 999 fine silver for an entirely different category of use. Controlled antimicrobial and water-related applications, and only within systems that actually depend on silver purity and managed release. The point is not to improvise a miracle. The point is to avoid contaminating one survival function with the wrong tool from another. And there is a caveat here. Silver is not food. It is not antibiotics. It is not a complete water strategy. It is not a substitute for calories, filters, fuel, sanitation, or medicine. History does not support magical thinking. It supports role separation. That is the real lesson from siege economies and broken systems. Do not ask one asset to do two incompatible jobs. Because when normality fractures, survival stops rewarding what is theoretically valuable and starts rewarding what is correctly matched to the problem in front of you. So the choice is binary. You can prepare in abstractions, stacking weight and repeating slogans about real money, or you can prepare for contact with reality, where the silver that helps you trade is not the silver that helps you drink. One approach looks impressive in peacetime. The other still works when peace is gone.